March 2nd, 2026, 22:31 local time. The Strait of Hormuz. The USS Fitzgerald is on fire. Not a small fire. Not a contained fire. An inferno that's spreading through her aft superstructure, fed by ruptured fuel lines and burning aviation gasoline from her destroyed helicopter. The flames are reaching 40 feet into the night sky. The heat is blistering paint off the surrounding structures, and the fire is spreading toward the aft magazine, where 30 tons of missiles and ammunition are stored. If the fire reaches the magazine, the Fitzgerald won't just be damaged, she'll cease to exist. I'm your host at U.S. Defense Review, where we analyze the military operations that shape global security. The May 7th engagement was the most visually dramatic of the entire Gulf confrontation. A destroyer burning like a torch in the night, her crew fighting both flames and the enemy simultaneously. 28 minutes after the fire started, while firefighters battled to save the ship, precision strikes began systematically destroying the Iranian battery that had set her ablaze. This is that story. Let's understand how the fire started. The weapon that struck the Fitzgerald was a Nasr-1 anti-ship missile, a relatively small weapon with a 130-kilogram warhead. The Nasr-1 had been used in multiple previous attacks. American ships had intercepted it successfully, dozens of times. On May 7th, the intercept failed. The Nasr-1 launched from a concealed position on the Iranian coast at 22:28. The Fitzgerald's radar detected it at 22:28:34. Time to impact, approximately 67 seconds. Two missiles launched within 8 seconds. Standard defensive procedure: 2 interceptors per threat. The first SM-2 reached the Nasr-1 at 22:29:21. Miss. The missile executed a terminal maneuver, a sharp dive toward the sea surface, that threw off the intercept solution. The SM-2 detonated above and behind the Nasr-1. The second SM-2 engaged at 22:29:24. Proximity kill. The SM-2's fragmentation damaged the Nasr-1's airframe and guidance system. The missile began tumbling, its flight path erratic, but it was still flying, and it was close. The Phalanx CIWS engaged at 22:29:31. The 20mm rounds tore into the damaged missile. Pieces broke away. The Nasr-1 was disintegrating in flight. At 22:29:38, what remained of the Nasr-1 struck the Fitzgerald. The impact point was the helicopter hangar, the large structure at the aft end of the ship that housed the destroyer's MH-60R Seahawk helicopter. The helicopter was inside, fully fueled, armed with torpedoes. The Nasr-1's damaged warhead, only partially functional after the defensive engagement, detonated against the hangar door. The explosion was smaller than a clean hit would have produced, but it was enough. The blast penetrated the hangar. The helicopter's fuel tanks ruptured. 300 gallons of aviation gasoline ignited simultaneously. The fireball filled the hangar in less than a second. 2 sailors died instantly. Aviation electronics technician, second-class Robert Chen, and aviation machinist's mate, third-class David Williams. They had been conducting maintenance on the helicopter when the missile hit. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Aviation gasoline burns at extremely high temperatures. The flames melted through aluminum structures, ruptured additional fuel lines, and found new sources of combustion throughout the aft superstructure. Within 30 seconds, the fire had spread from the hangar to the adjacent compartments. Within 60 seconds, it was climbing the aft mast, consuming communications equipment and antennas. Within 90 seconds, the entire aft section of the ship was engulfed. Captain Marcus Reynolds reached the bridge at 22:32, 3 minutes after the impact. He had been in his cabin when the missile hit, responding immediately to the general quarters alarm. What he found was a ship in grave danger. The aft third of the Fitzgerald was burning. Flames were reaching into the night sky, visible for miles. The heat was so intense that paint was blistering on structures 50 feet from the fire zone, and the fire was spreading forward toward the aft magazine. The aft magazine contained the ship's reserve weapons: SM-2 missiles, Tomahawk missiles, 5-inch gun ammunition. If the fire reached the magazine, The resulting explosion would destroy the ship entirely. "What's the status of the aft magazine?" Reynolds demanded. The chief damage controlman's response was grim. "Magazine temperatures are rising, Captain. We've activated the sprinkler system, but if the fire keeps advancing, we'll need to flood." Flooding the magazine would destroy millions of dollars in ammunition and eliminate half the ship's combat capability, but it would save the ship from catastrophic explosion. "How long do we have?" "At current fire progression, maybe 15 minutes before temperatures become critical. 15 minutes to stop the fire or flood the magazine." Reynolds faced a decision that would define his career. He could focus entirely on fighting the fire. Every sailor on board dedicated to containing the blaze. That was the safe choice, the conservative choice. Or he could divide his forces, some fighting the fire, some fighting back. The aggressive choice, the choice that risked the ship to punish the enemy. Reynolds chose aggression. "Weapons officer, do we have forward VLS capability?" "Yes, sir. Forward cells are fully operational. Fire control is nominal despite the aft damage. Target the launch site. 4 Tomahawks. Fire now." At 22:34:17, the first Tomahawk launched from the Fitzgerald's forward VLS cells. The ship was burning. Her aft section was engulfed in flames. Her crew was fighting to keep the fire from reaching the magazine, and she was launching missiles at the enemy. 4 Tomahawks in 23 seconds. Target: the Nasr-1 battery that had attacked the ship. Reynolds then transmitted to 5th Fleet. 5th Fleet Fitzgerald. "We are on fire. 2 KIA confirmed. Aft section fully engaged. Magazine at risk. Have initiated counterstrike. Request expanded targeting and surface support for potential evacuation." Vice Admiral Richardson received the message at 22:36. The Fitzgerald was in serious trouble. A ship on fire. Magazine at risk. Captain mentioning potential evacuation. This was as bad as it got short of actual sinking. But the ship was still fighting. Her captain had launched counterstrikes while his vessel burned. That kind of aggression deserved support. At 22:39, Richardson authorized an expanded strike. The target package was designed for precision, not the massive infrastructure strikes of previous engagements, but surgical elimination of the specific battery that had attacked the Fitzgerald. Intelligence had identified the Nasr-1 battery as part of a network of coastal defense positions near Bandar Abbas. The battery itself, its command post, its ammunition supply, its supporting radar. 4 targets, 4 components of a single weapon system, precision strikes to eliminate each one. The assets were close. The destroyer, USS Howard, operating 30 nautical miles from the Fitzgerald, launched 8 Tomahawks at 22:42. Targets: the command post and the supporting radar. 4 FA-18E Super Hornets, already airborne from the USS Theodore Roosevelt on combat patrol, were redirected toward the remaining targets at 22:44. They carried GBU-31J DAMS, 2,000-pound precision-guided bombs. At 22:59, 28 minutes after the Fitzgerald was set ablaze, the first American weapons arrived. The Fitzgerald's own Tomahawks struck first. 4 missiles saturated the Nasr-1 battery position, the launcher vehicles, the reload trucks, the crew positions, everything within a 100-meter radius. The battery that had set the Fitzgerald on fire was destroyed. The crew that had launched the missile was killed. At 23:02, the Howard's missiles arrived. The command post, a small bunker that coordinated Nasr-1 operations in the sector, received 4 Tomahawks. The structure was hardened, designed to survive single hits. 4 hits was too many. The bunker collapsed. The supporting radar installation received 4 more missiles. The antenna arrays were destroyed. The equipment buildings collapsed. The operators were killed. At 23:06, the Super Hornets arrived. Their targets: the ammunition supply point and any surviving infrastructure at the battery site. 8 2,000-pound JDAMs cratered the remaining structures. At 23:11, the strikes were complete. Total damage assessment: Nasr-1 battery, destroyed completely. Command post, destroyed. Supporting radar, destroyed. Ammunition supply, destroyed. Estimated Iranian casualties, 40 to 60 personnel. The entire coastal defense node that had attacked the Fitzgerald was eliminated, and aboard the Fitzgerald, the fire was being won. The damage control effort had been extraordinary. Fire teams had advanced into the blaze wearing full protective equipment, fighting the flames at close range. Sailors had rigged additional hoses, pulling water from the firefighting systems of nearby compartments. The key decision came at 22:47, when the chief engineer proposed a controlled backfire. "Captain, if we vent the compartment forward of the fire, compartment 3-148-2, we can create a fire break. The fire won't have anywhere to spread." The proposal was risky. Venting the compartment would release heat and smoke into the ship's interior. Sailors would need to evacuate entire sections, but it would stop the fire's forward progress. Reynolds authorized it. At 22:49, the compartment was vented. The fire, which had been creeping forward toward the magazine, suddenly had no new fuel sources in that direction. It began to collapse back on itself. By 2300, the forward spread had stopped. The magazine temperatures stabilized at 180 degrees, hot but below the critical threshold. By 2315, the fire was contained to the original hangar area and adjacent compartments, still burning, but no longer spreading. By 2345, the fire was extinguished. The aft section of the Fitzgerald was a charred ruin, but the ship had survived. The damage assessment was extensive, but not catastrophic. Helicopter hangar, destroyed. Aft mast and communications, destroyed. Compartments 3-152 through 3-168, gutted by fire. 2 sailors killed. 7 sailors treated for smoke inhalation and burns. The ship's propulsion was intact. Her forward weapon systems were operational. Her radar was damaged, but functional. The Fitzgerald could still sail. She could still fight. She had survived. The transit to Bahrain took 14 hours at reduced speed. The crew worked continuously, cooling hot spots, securing damaged equipment, tending to the injured. Captain Reynolds stayed on the bridge the entire time. He had risked his ship by dividing resources between firefighting and counterstrikes. The gamble had paid off, but it had been a gamble. The repair assessment required 6 months. New helicopter hangar, new aft mast, new communication systems, extensive structural repairs. When she emerged from dry dock, the Fitzgerald would be essentially rebuilt from frame 140 aft. The 2 sailors who died, Chen and Williams, were buried with full military honors. They had been doing their jobs, maintaining the aircraft that protected the ship, when the missile struck. Captain Reynolds received the Navy Cross for his actions during the engagement. His decision to maintain offensive capability while fighting a potentially fatal fire was cited as exemplary combat leadership. The diplomatic response followed the established pattern. Iran protested. America presented evidence. The world expressed concern. But the tactical lesson was clear. The Fitzgerald had been hit. She had been set on fire. She had faced potential catastrophic loss. And she had struck back within 4 minutes, before her captain even knew if the ship would survive. That reflex, that institutional aggression, is why American ships dominate the seas. Hit them, and they hit back. Set them on fire, and they launch missiles through the flames. 28 minutes from ignition to complete destruction of the attacking battery. That's the standard. That's the expectation. That's why the Iranian gunners who launched that Nasr-1 never got to celebrate their hit. They were dead before the Fitzgerald's fire was out. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. I'll see you in the next one.